Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. Graham, today we're going to talk about data.
Yeah. One of the things about data is that it goes out of sort of fashion, or not fashion. It gets old pretty quickly, and you need some really talented people to keep it up to date. And probably one of the best there is in the UK is with us today. His name's Martin Rides. Martin, welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction.
Well, I didn't mean any of it, to be honest with you.
No.
But I'm only kidding. No, seriously, I did, because to be honest with you, you've been kicking around this industry, for about 30 years, Martin. And I don't know, I suspect we met getting on that long ago. But you are, if you're one of the experts there are in the way in which data needs software around it to make it better. Yes. So tell us a little bit about your story, but also how what you do helps people.
Well, firstly, I'll correct you. It's actually 40 years I've been in this industry.
Oh, my.
But before the days of diskettes, were in the mag tape days. Admittedly, I don't look old enough to have been working in the
That's
industry.
why I said 30, Martin. You know.
Thank you very much for that.
Gift horse and all that kind of thing.
The tender age of 16, believe it or not, coming out of school and straight into a job that I had no idea what it involved. And cut a long story short, working in mailing, direct mail production, advertising agencies, and most latterly in the last 20 years, running the software bureau. Our sole goal in life is to bring software to the market which enables users to enhance and improve the quality of their contact data.
Let's be clear today. When we're saying data, and me as a finance person, I think of data as all of the information that underpins the numbers that we report in the business, the month-end results, the sales analysis, supplier analysis. But we're talking specifically here about data as it relates to your customer database, your lead database, and using those for marketing purposes.
Absolutely right, Kevin. Yes. Your customers, understanding your customers, who they are, where they are, whether they're alive or dead, which is quite important, as your figures from a CFO perspective will be totally skewed if you've based them on people who are no longer with us, as an example.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Martin and I overlap a little bit because I worked a little bit in that area myself for a sort of a leading credit referencing company, and then for another suppression company, and so I've got some experience in this area, and I know it's a really valuable thing. And if you take people who die, Martin, I mean, the last time I looked at this, it was something like, I want to say 1% of the population die every year, something like that, something of that order. It might be a bit more, a bit less, but basically, if you say 1%, then the population is roughly about 60 million. That's 600,000 people who potentially, some of them could have been on your client data or your prospect data or whatever. How will you find them on a client's file? How do you go about finding them and knowing they're dead and then doing something about it?
Well, we have access to, I would think, the largest portfolio of home movers, so people who have moved home, where they might have moved to, but also those that unfortunately are no longer with us. Yeah. Data provided to us by the likes of Smear and Ford, which is a mortar screen file, the bereavement register, Experian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we consolidate all of that data into a very large pot of about 500 million records dating back 7 to 8 years worth, and provide that data within our software that customers can then screen their customer database against, or their mailing files, or whatever it might be. We then identify which ones match with which, funnily enough, is a little bit of a dark art. It's not quite as simple as just making an exact match. So we have perfected this over the course of 20 odd years. And needless to say, when you're screening against 500 million records, it needs to be pretty quick.
Yeah.
It sounds madness that to look up one record in 500 million, but we can process millions of records in a matter of minutes.
Yeah. But Martin, if I'm signing up for email lists and things like that, quite often it'll be my first name
Mhm.
and an email address. How would you then link that first name and an email address to any of the catalogue of sort of house moves, deaths, whatever that you built your database up from?
I mean, it all has to come down to the email address. As I had a conversation with a customer of mine the other day, is not a personal identifier. I hate to say it, but families share email addresses, etc. So we rely very heavily on the postal address. That is something that's unique to an individual. I can't tell you whether the father and son of Joe Smith and Joe Smith Senior, for example, are the same person, but I can get pretty accurate in terms of a family and individual at a postal address. So
I know that very circumstance occurred when I was dealing with a deceased file, and I think it was somebody walked into a charity store that we'd suppressed their one Christopher, and of course it was the elder Christopher that walked in, but his son, younger Christopher, had sadly passed. And so it's quite embarrassing, but these mistakes are honest, but also they can be quite upsetting to the people involved.
I would say that they're the ones that hit the headlines, Graham.
Yeah.
When you realise that we're processing billions upon billions of records per month, quite literally, there is an error. There is a degree of error, albeit is very, very small, but unfortunately they are the ones that hit the headlines.
Yeah, I suppose 99.9999% accuracy.
Yeah, good luck to be at that level, Kevin.
That volume of data can probably still leave you with a few hundred records that are going to be wrong.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
The thing about, I suppose, deceased data, deceased data is really quite upsetting to receive mailings to somebody who's passed. So basically, they've died, they've moved on. Say a family member, a wife or a husband or whatever, is still in situ. It can be quite upsetting to receive continuous communications from various companies, quite genuinely. But the point is, the upset, the anxiety that creates is huge, which is a reason why I think people should be coming to your business more often.
Without a doubt. I'll give you one example. I rang my mother the other day. I sadly lost my father 6 years ago, and she has received telephone calls, numerous ones over the course of a year. So she's not being removed from any of these calling lists and asking for my father by name. Now, luckily, my mother's got a great sense of humour and didn't quite miss my father as much as I thought she might, but it can be unbelievably upsetting. We work with a charity. I won't name who the charity is, but I was talking to the customer the other day, and they work in a particular ailment, an area of that, and they are so sensitive about any communication that goes out the door. They don't brand any of their direct mail because the person who might be afflicted with this particular condition, they might not want their family to know. So they don't want something dropping on the doormat saying, your prospective, your father or whatever has got this condition. So there is a great deal of sensitivity out there. I mean, one of the things about any form of marketing communication, it's supposed to be personal. And when it is that personal, then you have to be extremely careful.
Yeah. It doesn't mean the industry is wrong or it should stop or pull up sticks or whatever. It just means that we have to observe methods, and yours is one of them. Your solutions are one of the ways in which businesses can actually do something about data. It's just as night follows day, things like this happen. People move, people die, and you've got embedded bad quality data because it's been captured wrongly. So there are things you can do about that. I mean, you offer solutions to all of these things, don't you?
Yes, we do. So again, all based around the fascinating topic of names and addresses, unfortunately. Yeah. I wish it was more exciting, but they are absolutely key to any form of data accuracy. And one other thing about the level of data accuracy is that we've got teams and teams of people analysing data through insight teams, within extremely large brands. But if they're working with out-of-date information, that skews their results. And businesses are making pretty big decisions based upon data. So it has to be as close to accurate as you possibly can.
Well, I find names and addresses fascinating anyway. I really do. I must be quite weird when it comes to things like that. But
You and I are like.
Well, if you've been around it for a long time, you do. You just have a sort of sixth sense for accuracy and so forth. So, and actually, the honest people like yourself, Martin, in the industry, who basically are trying to do something and offer a service to companies. There's a reluctance, isn't there, on a company's part, because it'll fix itself in some way. People will ring in and tell us that they're dead. Maybe there's a laziness that goes on. I don't know what it is, or a hope that it'll just go away. I mean, is there an intransigent? It's easy for me to say. Is there a way in which people just don't bother with this that you have to face up to every day?
Yes, absolutely. And some of it comes down to marketing budgets. So a lot of the cleansing work that takes place from our software's point of view is done at the last stage of direct mail production. For example, so a client will supply 100,000 contact records to a mail production house, and they will do the screening at the very last minute. And the customer will turn around and say, well, I didn't budget to remove those. Okay, we're not going to post them because obviously we're going to save you on all the postage, but it's not in our budget. And it might get to them. Well, yes, that's a challenge we come across every day.
Yeah. I just find it really sad that people don't appreciate all the aspects of a campaign. So basically, cleansing is just another part that you've got, like creative or a copy. It's just another thing that you've got to factor into a campaign.
Yeah, but with poor quality data, you can forget how good your creative is, how good the timing is, how good the offer is. It's wasted.
So how poor does it get then, Martin?
Oh, it varies. It really does. I think with the advent of GDPR, it woke a lot of brands up. So a lot of that very old data that was kicking around in prospect pools has now been culled and disappeared. And we've seen that in the results of the level of matching that takes place. So I think it's definitely improved. There's still a way to go. Some of the smaller businesses maybe that don't understand that they can do this, but they do use the various marketing channels that they maybe don't recognize the importance of it yet.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're trying to do with software for the future is about getting our software embedded within CRM systems directly. So the cleansing is happening daily, hourly, whatever it might be, at the heart of where the data lies.
Yeah.
Not the traditional method of extracting a very large file, sending it to somebody else, getting it clean, getting it back, updating the database, which takes time, effort, and money. And
if we just think about the structure, I mean, having worked for the Royal Mail, then this was sort of almost natural, and we were taught how you would structure an address. But if you think about the way in which it's important to keep your addresses synchronized with what they call the postcode address file, I think that's correct. Yes. So basically, that's almost like the file of addresses in the UK that is in a particular order, and it's known by Royal Mail, and the mail is processed according to that. So if you've got data that's not in line with that, then it can lead to costs, can't it?
It certainly can. I mean, it can also lead to the item not being delivered. Yeah. A full and accurate postcode, for example. There are penalties now for producing mail that doesn't comply with the postcode address file. Having said that, I will counter a little dig at Royal Mail's postcode address file. It is purely about the operational mechanism of getting an item delivered. Yeah. So I live at a very old cottage, which is, I'm very proud to say, it's called Dolphin Cottage. No idea why Dolphin Cottage, but if Royal Mail's postcode address file sees that, it just rips it out. Spring Cottage, or it might, what we call vanity addressing. Again, when it comes down to when you receive an item of mail, the first thing I do is look at, is it for me? And is it for this address? Yeah. That's personal to me. Very, very personal. I live in Suffolk. I'm very proud that I live in Suffolk.
Yeah.
I quite like the fact that my address has Suffolk in it. Again, this is quite old hat, Graham, and it is about names and addresses, which I'm obsessed with. But our software is sympathetic to personal vanity addressing, as well as making sure that it complies with Royal Mail standards.
Yeah. So Royal Mail might not necessarily agree with what your house is called, even though it's called Dolphin House. But that won't prevent somebody getting a mail to you because the rest of the address is correct.
No, of course not. No, absolutely right. So more personal perspective of how I view my address and how personal it is to me.
It's something about you that I've always known, that you're a bit of anti-establishment character, aren't you? But you
know me too well. I've been around too long, Graham. That's why.
So many bodies buried everywhere because of your. No. The thing is about your company called the Software Bureau. It's been around forever, isn't it? I mean, tell us your story with the Software Bureau.
Okay. When I was working, I came out of an ad agency N number of years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was. And I went to work for a direct mail production company in Orpington, DPS Direct Mail.
Yeah.
At that time, I've always been brought up with data. When I worked in the ad agency, I worked on managing small databases for like the BT and the likes. Mm-hmm. And when I joined DPS, I saw the value in data. And in those days, I mean, the financial value, Kevin, it was the most profitable part of our business by a very long way. And this was preparing names and addresses to put in, to personalize onto bits of paper and then to post them. At that time, there were two gentlemen who were working for a competitor of ours who I had used in my advertising days. And I've very high rated them as individuals. These are proper nerds, as I call it, but very likable nerds. And they approached us with a vision to develop some software that was very unique, because it had, in today's world, it wouldn't be unique, but a graphical user interface that displayed a workflow, quite literally a diagram. Now, to me, I've always wanted the software we ended up creating, which was Cygnus, with these guys, I could use. Now, I can't code to save my life. I might be the managing director of a software company, but I can't code. But I could use this software because it was point and click, very easy to understand user interface, and it was wonderful. So, excuse me. So what we've ended up doing unintentionally is we sort of demystified data processing, which is the global sort of description for what we do. And we put it into the hands of people that understood data but didn't need to be paid exorbitant salaries as software developers. And a roaring success from the company that Cygnus was created from and the Software Bureau was originally created from. We ended up having to sell this software to our competitors, which now we have 80, 90 different customers in the UK, all of whom are in the direct mail sphere. We've got others outside of that in sort of more data management. When we sold DPS Direct Mail 20 years ago to Stralfors, which was part of the Swedish Post Office at the time, why the Swedish Post Office wanted to buy us, I don't know, but we happily took their money. We spun off the software division, and that's how the Software Bureau was created. Yeah. So, in a nutshell.
A good summary, and you filled in some of the blanks for me as well. I mean, but you've constantly innovated. So I noticed from the Software Bureau website, and if you want to find out more about the Software Bureau, then go to thesoftwarebureau.com, and then within that there's a section that just sort of details your story. And the last thing that I note is that you've launched something called Clean Contacts. This is something to do with CRMs that you kind of hinted at. Give us
That's absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah.
Clean Contacts was an idea that came out into a product. So we moved a lot of our high volume processing into the cloud some years ago. and to be able to cater for the sheer volume of data that we were processing on behalf of other customers.
Yeah.
A spin-off from that cloud environment was that we wanted to be able to get, as I mentioned earlier, get at the heart of the data. Where is the data being held, and make sure that the cleaning of that data was done in situ, not through third-party providers. So we developed an app within the Microsoft Dynamics CRM world, and that app sits within the CRM itself. So yeah, it's quite an innovative way of going about it.
So somebody can literally just sort of, I don't know, put some of their records through the app cleaned.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can all be automated. The dream was that it would just be sitting in the background, and as new information was provided from our cloud service, then it would screen the entire CRM base and enhance and clean.
And do you have an idea that, you know, client one uses it, you know, there's 10,000 records being processed every week, and client two only has 500. So do you have
it covers all areas from any volume.
Right. Right. Okay.
Still, I have to say, it's still to take off in the way that we would like it to. And thank you for the plug, Graham. That might help.
Well, you know, well, I mean, it's a sort almost like an endorsement in a sense, because I endorse you because I think, you know, anybody that's been working around this industry for as long as you have, I mean, well, apart from the medal that you're owed, you know, it does obviously, it's a bit like Kevin and sort of finance and everything. He knows everything there is to know. I mean, he knows definitely where all the bodies are buried in the world of chief financial officers, don't you, Kevin?
That'd be telling.
But
Martin, what you're saying there is that pretty much as you get new information that says a customer is deceased or has changed address or whatever, the update into your client's records then is pretty much instant, because that scan is going on pretty much all the time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But it can be scheduled according to the client's wishes. But yes, that's what the idea was. That's certainly, I believe, the future of where it needs to get to. Real-time updates happening within the heart of where data sits.
Yeah. So it's not something that you're trying to sell to a client to do once every 3 months or once every 6 months. It's very much let's make sure your data is right all of the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the model again was on a subscription model. So from a commercial point of view, it works well for us, because once it's in situ, it's not going to move. It's doing its job day in, day out. It can be budgeted very easily, which is one of the issues around, I mentioned earlier, one of the obstacles that we have when it's being processed by a third party is a lot of this, the financial side is not being budgeted for, and therefore is being excluded or ignored.
One of the things that we spoke about last was this whole idea of finding people who've moved. Now, it was one of those things that was close to my heart, because I helped develop a service that provided that. So this is a situation that basically somebody lives at address A. So Kevin lives currently up in the Northumberland, and he wises up and he says, I'm going to move to Yorkshire because that's where all the good-looking people live. So effectively, he moves down to West Yorkshire, and he gets a house, let's just say in Ilkley, because it's befitting of his standards. So and budget. So basically, he moves from Northumberland to Ilkley. Now, the issue then is Kevin's on a subscriber list for he's into trains and stuff. He's got a hobbyist magazine that he's getting all the time. He just completely forgets to redirect his information to the new address. Now, Kevin's got itchy feet, so he moves not only from Ilkley, then he goes into Leeds. So he lives now in Leeds because it's even better. So basically, he's now moved twice. You have the ability, don't you, to find Kevin at his Northumberland address and then almost trace him to where he is now.
Yeah, that chaining event. A lot of this happens through the data providers themselves, Royal Mail being the largest with their national change of address. So when you do sign up to have your address, your mail forwarded through redirection after the period of redirection has lapsed, then it comes to us, and we can then continue to I don't know, right, we use the word trace, but or stalk or anything like that. But reunite Kevin with his subscription. And a lot, what we do see is one of the biggest uses of that form of data is reuniting people with money, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but it's an FCS standard, or FCA standard, that you have to try and reunite people with lost funds, for example. So,
yeah, that's going to be a big area. And I can think that, premium bonds. Somebody might have bought you premium bonds as a kid that you've never touched.
Absolutely.
That's probably one of the last places you think about telling when you change address.
Yeah.
They have no need to communicate with you, so nothing ever came through the forwarding address. So, yeah.
Yeah, I should think there's billions of pounds sitting in funds somewhere which have not been
apparently it's the best Christmas party going, Martin, up at NSNI. I mean, they've got more money than sense up there. But I mean, having said that, it is really important. Oddly enough, it's a little known story, but basically with the national change of address, I think I used it one of the first commercial times with a large bank who I was managing for Royal Mail at the time. And basically we used this and effectively it reconnected them to customers who'd moved. Yeah. And this is a bank, remember, but they got a huge response to their mailing and they couldn't have been happier. But the whole idea of it was that it was a bank doing it. Imagine it was somebody you liked, so, but from that point of view, the idea of being able to connect you to your new address, it's something that's always fascinated me, but it is something that can be done, Martin.
Without a doubt, yes, and quite easily, to be honest with you. I mean, think about the cost of acquiring a new customer, according to the brand itself, but it can run into tens of thousands of pounds. And again, harp on about moaning about brands, but it's incredible how many will spend £10,000 acquiring a customer, and when they move, they go, oh, well, never mind, I'll spend another 10,000 trying to find another customer. Yeah. Well, you've got an existing customer or a previous customer who's right to buy from you again, so they would actually possibly want to hear from you. I'm thinking about car advertising and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there's a couple of stories around that I was involved in at the time. But basically, creating whole databases of people who had moved, and millions of people. But the fun was almost like bringing across the criteria that they had at your Northumberland address and moving it to where you now live in Leeds. And it's that kind of ability that creates enormous value for people. And as you say, Martin, if you try to acquire a new customer, it's going to cost you a heck of a lot of money, especially one you might call them lapsed, or yes. Possibly I've just mislaid my keys. I've just mislaid my subscription to this particular thing. So they still have probably a lot of interest in the thing that you're going to talk to them about. But the trick is not to be Big Brother, as you say. You don't want to come across as a stalker or anything like that. It's very much a very important communication issue.
I'll come back to the conversation I had with one of our charity customers the other day. They don't use this service, which is entirely their prerogative, because they felt it was slightly insensitive to try and find people. There was some confusion around GDPR as well because of the use of the word profiling, and it scared a lot of people away from using home mover data sets. I think, unfortunately, the new data protection bill that was due to go through Parliament before it was mothballed or canned, as it was right at the last minute, would have clarified a lot of issues. And we still live in hope that they'll get resurrected in some way, because it does need some clarity from a legal perspective, from a data protection perspective, that you are doing the right thing through legitimate interests to say, we've had an existing relationship with this individual. It's in the customers, or the customers going to benefit from the fact that we're staying in touch.
I think sometimes I think people protest too much. This is something where you've had going. Sorry, Kevin, picking on your hobbyist interest, but basically assuming that you had an interest in that, and then again, for whatever reason, life had moved on for a little while. You'd moved a couple of times in fairly quick succession, and wouldn't you like to have an offer from that hobbyist magazine again? Just by saying, look, we're really sorry that we've lost touch, but if you're still the same Kevin Appleby or something, or words that were less anxiety driving, then it would be a really good way of actually what is it like when we meet an old friend again? Like you, Martin. I mean, at the end of the day, it's good to meet you again. And we recently had Jenny Mosley on, who you will
Yeah.
know, of course.
Oh,
And
sure.
in the past we've had a number of other people uh, who you will know, and it's so nice to reconnect with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely nice to reconnect. And I can see that there's a legitimate interest there. And you've never actually unsubscribed from whatever service it is. You've just moved on and not changed your information.
Yeah.
But Martin, in your software, you're carrying a huge volume of names and addresses. And I'm guessing it is just names and addresses.
Yes.
At
Yes.
what stage, at what stage does that become personally sensitive data that you'd be looking for person's permission to keep?
Well, deceased, luckily, have no rights under the Data Protection Act, which is wonderful because I can do what I like with a dead person's contact information.
Yeah.
Obviously, the supply of data through to us, we don't collect any of this data personally. The supply of that data comes from companies that have gone through the data protection policies, privacy policies, etc., in collating that information, including Royal Mail, Experian, and the likes. So we rely on that. Obviously, it's then when we take ownership, or we're the custodians of that data, we have to make sure that it is protected and used in accordance with how it was collected. So, yeah, it's a big part of what we have to do. Certainly our information security is a big investment from our point of view, but we do recognise that data is valuable, but it's also extremely personal, and we have no right to use it outside of the Data Protection Act.
One of the things that I'm constantly asked for, because I provide data of relatively wealthy people, but that's kind of on the basis of things that sort of describe that wealth. So now, one of the things that people come to me and say, well, have you got emails? Now, the data partner that I work with does have emails, but we don't distribute them because we just don't. But the thing is, Kevin made the point earlier that, if I've just given you my email, and maybe my first name, etc., then it's very difficult to get a join. But often there is a join because people have captured more than just the email, etc. How do you have many people who come to you with a view that I've got all these emails? Is there any way in which I could just take those emails and match them to another set of emails and get the addresses to find out how many of those people have moved? I'm not sure that you'd necessarily be bothered about that because you've still your email kind of continues.
Yeah.
But it's this interplay between them capturing emails and wanting to know if they've moved, died, whatever.
Yeah. We don't come across it a lot, Graham, but
Yeah.
a move is a life stage, part of the life stage cycle.
Yeah.
So from a marketing perspective, if I can identify somebody who is about to move, there are pre-mover files out there, somebody who has moved, and I happen to be in queue, for example,
Yeah.
well, they're an absolute bang-on prospect for me. So it's not just about keeping databases up to date, but there's an indication there that they might be downsizing, for example. They might be expanding, having families. So you can take certain knowledge from a move.
Yeah.
They've moved from Aberdeen AB1 2DY down to SW1V. I'd say they've probably won the lottery. and therefore they're ripe for a Lamborghini.
Yeah. They had a Lamborghini in the north because they were wealthy oil producers, and they're now living in a squat in Kensington.
There's no sense in having the Lamborghini up in Aberdeen because you got some empty roads to drive it fast on. There's no chance you're going to do the SW whatever.
Well, they do a 4x4 Lamborghini, don't they?
But Jeremy Clarkson does a Lamborghini tractor.
There is, yes, Jeremy Clarkson, isn't it? Yeah.
Is that your pastime? What would your pastime be then, Martin? How would you get through a weekend? Is it a football thing, or is it a car thing, or what's?
I like gardening, funnily enough.
Okay.
Yeah. I like growing things, especially chilies.
All right, that's interesting.
Cornichon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the green ones or the red ones?
Oh, the bloody hot ones.
All right. Just can't.
I don't eat them myself because they don't.
Oh wow! It's well, more power to you, but they just burn right through me.
Some of the ones I'm growing this year are very hot. To put it mildly.
Will you actually sort of go to shows and let people eat them?
I'm far too shy for that. No, I'll make some sauces and just watch people cringe and sort of buckle up in pain as they're eating one of my chutneys.
Oh well, we've learned something extraordinarily interesting about you. You're the.
I'll send you a pot, Graham. There you go.
Oh no, please don't. No, seriously, don't. I'm sure it'd be lovely though, but not for me. But I have to say, it's been lovely catching up with you, Martin. If you looked at the future for the next, I don't know, half a dozen years or so, what do you think's going to come along that's going to shake data up?
Dare I say AI? It's something we've been looking at for the last couple of years about how we enhance or improve our software. And we're working on a project at the moment, which is because of the amount of data that we process, and no one data record is the same as another, as I'm sure you know, Graham. Mm-hmm. They come in all weird and wonderful shapes. And whilst we've had 20 years of manually reviewing this data, I think AI, machine learning, will enhance the quality of our software. Yeah. The power of the cloud, which we've embraced for the last 6 to 7 years, is just phenomenal. The one story I do tell, which goes back to my days when I was before the grey hair came along, we used to walk our customers around our computer room, and it was really impressive. It was an enormous, great room, and it had flashing lights everywhere. Now I have no flashing lights, so I've asked our developers to connect up the Azure dashboard and put loads of lights on it, so it looks really impressive. But that's been an absolute unbelievable enhancement to what we're doing. We're spinning up to 800 servers at a time to process data, because it's big data. It might not be the metadata that Kevin's used to, but it is a lot of data having to be processed. From there, data is the new gold, and I think they said that about 10 years ago. So there's still more value to come out of.
Do you reach out to, say, America and the Middle East and so forth? You have the ability to process other countries' data? No,
we don't. We are very much UK centric. Okay. And the way that we've created our cloud infrastructure is that all UK data centers, Microsoft data centers in the north or the south, or is it west and south, one or the other. Right. So again, from a data protection point of view, nothing leaves the UK, and it sits in a cloud, whatever that cloud is.
Wow. Well, on that note, we want to thank you, Martin, for joining Kevin and I on the Next 100 Days podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, Graham, data. And it is so important to have accurate and up-to-date data. And we've been talking there about the data that's really specific to the direct mailing field. Yeah. And now, if you've got bad data, it's a waste of your time, your efforts, sending out loads of communications. You've printed stuff, you've put postage on it, and you've taken time. It's going to cost you money. if you start sending it out to people that no longer exist or no longer live there. It's going to cause embarrassment if you send it to widows of bereaved people. So I think Martin's doing a super, super job.
Yeah. It is just one of the people who's been around longest and has such a passion for data cleansing, for providing software that's going to improve the quality of data. And, you know, I worked myself in that industry for a little while, and I found it fascinating that, you know, you would find charities in one particular charity comes to mind, and they provided their data to us to do an audit. Kevin, half of the people on the file were dead.
Yeah.
Now they just not looked at their data for any particular recency. I mean, I think 5 years comes to mind, but basically it was, this is what they said, they hadn't looked at it for 5 years, and basically then half of that data was dead. Now granted, it was a charity, and it was a charity that was, shall we say, aimed at the older person, but nonetheless it was the potential for them ruining the relationships that they had with potential donors was just legion, and the opportunity that it presented them to actually be up to date with, you know, acknowledging that a passing had gone in with one of their donors, just something that would have been clever. But frankly, you know, leaving data to wither on the vine is just a bad move.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Martin started talking about AI at the end. In the finance world, AI and data is a big thing. You know? AI has the ability to see patterns across data. It has the ability to pick out anomalies from those patterns. And a lot of finance folk are looking at month end and thinking, well, part of our month end process is normally looking through the accounts before we close them, making sure that things that are wrong have been corrected. The power of AI is it starts telling you, oh, perhaps you should look at this particular transaction to Fred Smith. It's way outside the normal range of values you'd expect there, or there's something else that looks a little bit odd. It's gone to a different ledger account than normally you'd have from this supplier. And you know, the power of AI, not necessarily to change the data, but to alert you to things that don't look right.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful.
Well, for me, it's been a bit of a trip down memory lane, and I've enjoyed reconnecting with Martin from the Software Bureau. And you can contact him at thesoftwarebureau.com, and I'm sure he will give you his ear and perhaps give you an introduction into some of the services that might help cleanse your data going forward. So today, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.